Hello, good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm getting yourself.
I'm good. Good morning for me. I'm in the west on the West Coast
You're on
actually.
the West Coast. I was
Yeah.
wondering, yeah, when I was talking, going back and forth with Naomi, I was like, all right, make sure you put EST.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because yeah, it can be very confusing, yeah, being on the other coast. But
So what
yeah.
time is it on your end?
It's 10. Yeah, so it's
10? Okay.
not bad.
So not too crazy.
Not too crazy. Good start of the day.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm getting yourself.
I'm good.
Leah, are you also on the West Coast? Maya was just telling me what time it is for her. So I didn't know if.
Oh, no, I'm in New York City right now. So I think I'm
Okay,
on the same coast as you, right? You're in
same coast.
yeah, North Carolina.
So same time zone.
Yes.
Oh,
It's
awesome.
early for my
No, it's not
Well,
bad. It's 10
Oh
a.m.
yeah, you wake up earlier than me, so.
Yeah.
um, that I once did a symposium that was in Australia, and it was like via Zoom, and the symposium started, I want to say like 10 a.m. their time, which was like 8 p.m. my time.
My
So
God.
like the part that I was
Wow.
interested in of looking at was like at 1 o'clock in the morning. So
Mm,
that is a time job.
Yeah, that's
wow,
a
that's
lot.
the furthest you can be.
But thank you guys so much for doing this. I know it was a bit of like a short notice in regards of like getting schedules to line up and stuff. So thank you guys so much, and excited for the screening as well as doing the Q&A after the screening as well. So thank you guys so much. As I've mentioned before, this is being recorded as well. So for archival purposes. So it's going now. So just kind of giving you guys a heads up. But other than that, it's like kind of free reign. But the interview itself for the Pass the Mic should be a written version, from my understanding. Um, but we're recording it as well. So
Okay, great.
now to kind of get things kind of rolling, I just like do like a little like chit chat because this is before like an official like interview, just kind of see how like people are and whatnot. Um, so my name's Alexis. I was on who's in. Uh, I just recently graduated UNCW from their film studies master's program. So now I am truly fully an adult now. um, so now I'm in that weird phase of post graduation. What do I do with the rest of my life? So I'm teaching a couple of classes at UNCW still, and I am affiliated with the IFML, the Intersectional Feminist Media Lab. Was started by Stephanie Bird, who's kind of been really the showrunner for all of this and organizing all this stuff. So there's a little bit of background like on me. And I normally, when I have done interviews before, I have asked each person to kind of, in a couple of sentences, for those who may not know them, kind of describe themselves. But I know you two have had a long history together. So I kind of want to switch it up a little bit. So, Maya, can you actually, in a couple of sentences, introduce Leah? And Leah, afterwards, can you introduce Maya in a couple of sentences? So we'll kind of start off that way.
I
Yeah.
love
And
that.
do you mean like just a like what Leah's done or and
Yeah,
how
or
we
just, I mean, however you feel Leah needs to be introduced. So for if someone just in case if they do like release, this recording, or we give you guys a copy. I've seen you had some interviews on your site as well. So for someone who may have stumbled across this and has no idea who Leah is, how would you introduce Leah?
Yeah, well, I love this. So Leah is an incredible director and producer and also incredible cinematographer. She is from Westchester, New York, and we actually got to meet when we were in college, and we were randomly assigned to work together. It was for like a documentary, basically kind of like our senior thesis in a way, or like the class right before that. And our assignment was that we had to make a 15-minute documentary, and we had to like look up the topic and, you know, everything from start to finish. And Leah was assigned, was in my group, and we had sort of known each other. We weren't like super close, but we had filmed something together, right, Leah? Like earlier, like the year before or something. But we just kind of like knew of each other around Ithaca. So we're randomly assigned to work together. And it was sort of like immediate that I knew like, oh, this is like my person, because Leah was like in it with me from the beginning. Like both of us were like scrambling really hard once we found this article about a doctor who travels from New Mexico to Texas, or abortion doctor who travels. We ended up like trying to contact a bunch of different clinics and trying to see like before we like secured the subject, we were trying to see like who were the abortion doctors we could talk to. And, you know, I'm researching, like trying to figure out who are the best people to talk to. We talked to so many clinics, and Leah was just like right there with me doing the same thing. And I just knew that like, okay, we're in this together. So yeah, Leah is an incredible person, super kind and loving, and just a great co-director and like best partner in crime, really, to have. So yeah, I know that's more than a few sentences, but I know it doesn't do it justice, but that's Leah.
What if I was just like, Maya's evil? I
hate her.
Your introduction is just, Maya did nothing on the film. She did.
Yeah.
So Leah, did she do a good job before?
I will say,
sorry, not to put you on the spot.
No, I'm gonna like me. I have like a concise way of describing Maya, I think. Because you know, this could be the whole recording. We could talk about it. So yeah, Maya is very talented and principled, and I think growing up from Berkeley, California, in the Bay Area, those lessons learned and like the culture surrounding anti-colonization, anti-racism, and anti-oppression in general are very much instilled in Maya as a person, and like it comes through in the filmmaking process and like the kindness and care that she puts in towards people that she's filming with, and the sensitivities around it, and also outside in her activism work. So Maya, I would say, is just like a very principled through and through person who incorporates, you know, what she says, what she's made, she says what she's, what's the word, she says what she means, and she does what she means. She's a woman of her word, and yeah, also obviously my best friend, but you know, that's a whole nother story.
That is the true point of this interview. It's about friendship. That was great. I think I got to know a little bit about each of you from each other's more of the personal aspect, as well as obviously you guys are prolific filmmakers, especially, you know, being the 40 under 40, you know, you guys graduated and started rocking. And, you did mention that you two had met on the short film. Through context, I believe that's the provider, correct? So the provider, in hindsight, kind of want to start there, so it kind of feels like the beginning. It kind of feels like foreshadowing for what was to come in regards of the work that you did on the Divide. So can you both kind of explain how you landed on, you know, deciding on moving forward with the provider, and how that led you to then work on the feature on the Divide?
Yeah, I can start, and then Leah, you can take what I don't say. But yeah, like I mentioned, you know, Leah and we met in college, and it was just part of the class assignment to find a topic. And we immediately did research. It was actually even during class. Now I can admit that, but I just came across an article about a doctor who travels. And Leah and I both had never heard of that profession needing to exist. You know, we're both she's from the East Coast, I'm from the West Coast. We are from areas where access to abortion and reproductive rights is very secured. So we didn't know that something like a doctor who travels needed to exist, because in areas where abortion access is really restricted, there's not a lot of local providers due to like stigma and safety issues, right? Because there's so many protesters outside. So there is a need for doctors who travel in and out. So we came across an article about somebody who travels, and we had like 5 minutes before we had to pitch it to our professor and in front of the whole class. And we're both like, yeah, let's just do this one. Let's go for it. Why not? This sounds like an incredible story. We're both interested in this. So we ended up saying it in class, and immediately our professor was like, yep, that's the one. Like, go do it. So it was really from there that like the provider began, just from an article. And we ended up, after many calls with many abortion clinics and doctors, we ended up being connected with a doctor, Dr. Shannon Carr, who travels from New Mexico to Texas. And that's really the main subject of the film. So The Provider is just a short film that's following her journey and how she provides access to abortion in Texas, despite like risks to her safety and threats to her safety. And it was actually during the production of The Provider that Leah came across another article about, the last abortion clinic in McAllen, Texas. And we also heard about, how restricted access was on the border. And so we actually made our way to the border while we were filming The Provider, and we met a bunch of organizers at a women's rights rally in Brownsville, which is another area in the Rio Grande Valley. And from there, we're like, wow, this is an incredible story. We want to keep following these organizers and following, this last remaining clinic on the border. But it didn't make a whole lot of sense to have it be part of The Provider, because The Provider was such a, it was like a short film about this one doctor, and we really wanted to do justice to that story. So it was after we had finished The Provider, I went to festivals, that we actually got to be reconnected with a doctor who knew some of the clinic workers in McAllen. So that's really where On the Divide began. So it started while we were still in school, really, like 2014, we had started filming, but like real principal photography for On the Divide happened like in 2016, right after school. So yeah, like you said, we really hit the ground running, like right after The Provider was done. We were like, we gotta see what this story is about. And yeah, we never could have imagined how it all developed 7 years later.
Leah, what's your version of the events?
Very different. No, I'm kidding. No, Maya said it best, and I would just add that the experience of making The Provider, besides like topic inspiration, I think being able to share it around at film festivals, such as like shout out to Visions Film Festival, was one of our first film festivals that it played at, and having other people watching this film and feeling like they resonate with it, they feel like it's very important, they wish it was longer, just getting that encouragement from the broader film community. Am I frozen?
You're fine.
Good.
Okay, sorry. The broader film community and that support really did help us keep going and pushing, even though it was very, very hard, as Maya mentioned. But yeah, I think it absolutely informed the feature. And the biggest departure, I think, is that Maya and I really decided that we wanted to follow people's lives play out and kind of get outside of echo chambers and outside of like the issue being like a dichotomy debate with experts and like talking heads, and just making something that just shows the real effects of what these policies have on people and how it reverberates outside of the community.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I noticed watching The Provider and On the Divide, especially in On the Divide, of just how, especially when the topic of abortion, something so political, so at times controversial, of how easy it can be to feel very like back and forth, and how this documentary, it's very human. It really humanizes. There's this grounding element to it, which is interesting, of going from On the Provider, which is talking heads, it feels. So it is very interesting seeing, the evolution of you two as filmmakers of that process. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, that you both were, when you started like 26 or graduating, like getting really into the midst of it for On the Divide, around like 21, 22, I believe you've mentioned before in other like interviews. And you've also mentioned that there have been a lot of mentors that have helped you on this journey. So I'm curious if you can kind of talk about some of those key people and how they shaped your approach to filmmaking, especially with an On the Divide.
Yeah, that was something that, again, like I briefly mentioned this before, but without that support and the mentorship we received, I don't know how much motivation we'd have to keep going and moving forward. So, and along the way, it was 7 years. So there's a lot of people that had influenced us, and starting off with Sandy Siafi, who we met at a film festival, who basically was a big cheerleader behind like making this a longer feature and or series, and really got the ball rolling. And then talking to like incredible filmmakers that we were able to get in touch with through our Ignite fellowships at the Sundance Institute. So like Lacey Schwartz, who did Little White Lie, and Jeff Orlowski, who made Chasing Coral and Chasing Ice and The Social Dilemma. And these are filmmakers that really gave us like solid advice about starting out, like, this is our first feature, so this probably is best to be a standalone and not make it a series right now, and like, advice on how to keep going with like little funds. And then of course like the support from our friends and family in the form of GoFundMe's and just like love and like housing us. Maya and I lived with our parents the entire time basically, and that was, had its ups and downs, but the sacrifices we made to make this film. And then there's someone in particular, Sean Weiner at the Jacob Burns Film Center, who, when Maya and I both had fellowships where we made short films at the Jacob Burns Film Center, and Sean Weiner was a really, really influential person in like getting us to hone in on our direction, and like, oh yeah, this film is about 3 people who don't fit neatly on the either side of the debate. And Sean was definitely a person who helped us refine that, and then also just consulting feedback advice. And then of course, we, towards like the end of production, when Maya and I really knew we needed producing support, we reached out to Diane Becker and Melanie Miller and Amanda Spain and Elizabeth Woodward. And these 4 women, incredible, talented filmmakers and producers, and seasoned as well, came in and really like believed in the project and us, and like got it to the finish line. Like without them, the film definitely would not have been made. So, and I definitely consider them mentors, not just producers on our film, but friends and mentors. So like without them and their support and their influence in the film world, the film definitely would not be made. So like just like a brief overview of the main players, but there's so many more people who have like supported our film, and in the like Sundance Ignite Fellowship, Toby Brooks, the person in charge of, so like all of the folks that we met at the labs, who ran the labs that we were part of, like ended up being like mentors to us. And I know I'm probably forgetting people. Maya, did I forget major names?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think just to add on to that, it just would be like thanking the fellowships that gave us the opportunity to, be able to workshop the project like that, like Leah was saying, like, creative culture was an incredible fellowship that we did at the Jacob Burns Film Center, which Sean Weiner was the director of creative culture at that time. And it just was like within these spaces that we were really able to hone in on what the story was, like, you know, what else did we need to get from our subjects? Were we done film? You know, we'd been filming for so long and it was just Leah and I, right? And we were like, we have no perspective anymore. We're just like, we think we have something, we don't know. But it was like the mentors, like Carla Gutierrez, she's a consulting editor on our film. She was somebody we met at Hedgebrook. She's an incredible editor. And she also, like Sean, was like, no, this is what your film is. Like, and we were like, but we don't have any of that footage that you're talking about. And then we ended up looking at the footage together with her and she was like, you have everything you need right here. Like, what are you talking about? But that's just, you know, it goes to show you that it takes a village. It takes a village to make a film, right? You can't just do it alone. And yeah, we have so many people to thank, so many people who gave us chances. We did get a lot of rejections along the way, but it only, you know, made us stronger filmmakers, I think, and just made us learn a lot of like, okay, how do we refine this? And we would sometimes we get rejected, we'd apply again with like, you know, stronger materials because we really took the feedback in, and then we ended up like getting that acceptance for that grant or the fellowship. One other really amazing initiative that does no longer exist, but Tribeca, like their film institute was really important, instrumental to like getting our film made. Like they were kind of one of the first people who really gave us a chance in terms of like giving us big funding and also accepting us into their story lab, which also really helped with the edit process. So yeah, just to like echo the sentiment around like mentorship, getting support, all of that was so helpful in getting this film made. And I don't think Leah and I would be here talking to you today if we didn't have that kind of help. And the last thing I want to say too is just like, this is really a testament to Leah's like go-getterness, because she's really the person who found our producers. Like she connected with Elizabeth Woodward at another job she was at, and she was the one who really like wrote to Mel and Diane when we were at a film festival. She was like, Maya, we should email people. I'm like, whatever. We'll figure it out. You know, I'm just like, I'm so tired of all this. But like Leah was just, you know, has always been kind of that person to be like, no, we need to talk to people and we need help. And so, yeah, just thankful for my co-director.
So speaking of like co-directing, right? Of you, because this film was taking place over several years in, you know, development of getting this to be what we now have like as a feature. Can you talk a little bit about how you two work together? You know, because I think we can see the names and be like, oh, co-director, but especially in a doc or just in any film, it's like, so who did what, who you know, where did that who did what role, or did you guys like swap, right? Because the film does not feel like two different people coming together and making film. It is one cohesive piece, and that takes a lot of work to have a single voice from two clearly different people. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can start on that. Yeah, so what I think really helped our relationship and like our co-directing relationship was that we really bring different skills to the table. So not only am I a director and producer, but I also am an audio producer. So I have background in like audio producing podcasts and also being a sound recordist on sets. And then Leah, like I mentioned in the beginning, is an incredible director and producer, but also incredible cinematographer. So we were able to bring those skills together, and really like we were kind of, you know, we're a two-person team. We had like all of those skill sets to really make a crew in a way, which was really helpful for us because the film, if you've seen the film, On the Divide is a very intimate film where, you know, we're tackling a lot of topics that are hard to talk about, right? And in a lot of spaces like abortion clinics or, you know, filming protesters outside, in a lot of spaces that, you know, it might be hard to get access to film in. But Leah and I both were very careful about just like our presence in this community that is not our own. And I think it was helpful that it was just the two of us, you know, building relationships with people. I think we were able to really build a lot of trust among the people we were filming with, because we weren't like a large crew coming in with cameras and, you know, trying to just get whatever footage we needed to get. We were really like careful and, you know, making sure people understood like what film we were doing, like who we were. And we also, I think both of us were really good at kind of tag teaming on like, okay, like who might be interviewing this person today, who might be like, you know, more on like the production side, and then also just being really careful, like we're both very in tune with like, okay, this might not be the best thing to film right now, you know, or like this is very sensitive, let's like be just careful about how we approach this. And it's also just really helpful to have a co-director when, you know, maybe one of you's not feeling well that day, or like things are going on for you, and then to have someone else like step in and kind of, you know, take the rein on things was always really helpful. So yeah, I think that's really how we worked. And I'm so happy that you said that it feels like a cohesive film from like one person, because I think that was really because Leah and I mean, we've been working together for so long, so we really like started to kind of have the same thoughts, but also at the same time, I really appreciated that like she was, you know, would listen to me if we ever had like disagreements. We could come to, you know, we'd be like, okay, I see what you're saying, like let's come to kind of like an agreement that would make sense from the both of us. And an exercise that we did one time that was really, really helpful when we were kind of in the editing process was we wrote out like just by ourselves in like a notebook, like, okay, what are some scenes that stick out to you that you think are like top scenes when you think about what you want to see in this film, right? And then we were able to share those, and then we had a lot of similarities and some were different, right? And we were able to like really talk with each other about that and be like, okay, well, let's like, why did you want to use that film or that scene and I didn't want to use that scene? Yeah, I think we were just really able to come to a clear consensus in the end of what we wanted the film to be, really. And I think that was really because of all the work we put into like, okay, let's talk about this, let's break this down, and let's come to like a, you know, an ultimate agreement in the end.
Leah, your thoughts?
I don't have much to add, because I think Maya said everything I was thinking, because we have the same brain now, because of this film. But no, yeah, I think definitely the emotional like aspect of it, like 7 years is a long time. We each had like personal issues and like family issues going on, and so it was like just so helpful for like during a period of time for like one of us to kind of step up while the other steps back. And it kind of still happens now. I mean, even with like post-production and the impact, Maya and I are still like doing this, you know, this tandem, you know, supporting each other on this project. So it's definitely not just during production. But yeah, no, Maya said most of what I was thinking on the issue.
So you two are the same brain. I mean, I think that, I mean, it would be surprising if that didn't happen after working on something for so long together. I am interested. So, Maya, you had mentioned that there was a notebook that each of you had, or you had written out scenes that had stood out to both of y'all. Now, I think Maya, you had mentioned in a different interview that there's a bunch of footage that didn't make it. I think you said that you two had actually traveled to Mexico and gotten footage there. So I'm curious that from the scenes that stood out to you both, is there a scene, or is there a moment or a place or some footage that still stands out to you, but it did not make the final cut, and why it didn't make the cut?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I think there are a few scenes that I, wish, the scene where we did end up going to Mexico, like, is it's an informative scene, right? So there's scenes that I'm like, oh, I wish like this could have gone in the film, but ultimately what we were able to do was kind of figure out, like, what are the scenes that really make sense for the story that we're trying to tell, right? What is going to ultimately drive this story forward, and the story is really following Ray and Mercedes and Denise. So we talk about this a lot, like in the documentary world, in the film world in general, but it's like the idea of killing your darlings. So it's really hard, right? It's like there's always a few scenes that you're like, wow, I really wish we were able to put that in, or I really wish like, we were able to get that soundbite in. But I think ultimately I understand and am happy with like what became the final film. I think if anything, if there was any regrets, it would just be like, oh, I wish we were there for that scene, right? I think what was hard, and what Leah has mentioned before, is that we were independent filmmakers, still are, but we were just out of college, we were working multiple jobs. We didn't really have the resources to be able to be like, okay, we're going to just go and move to McAllen and film this and have that be our lives, right? Like we had to do all these other things in order to survive and film the film. So we, made multiple trips, right? We would go back and forth and stay for a period of time and get what we needed to get. But there would be things that happen. It's reality, right? There'd be things that would happen when we weren't there, and we'd be like, oh, I wish we were able to get that. Like an example is we ended up putting photos of it at the end of the film, but there was this really amazing thing that happened where a lot of church members or members of like the faith-based communities came to the McAllen abortion clinic and blessed the clinic. And we had heard about that, but we didn't have the funds or time or resources to be able to go to film that when it happened. And that was a moment that I really felt like, oh, this would be an incredible thing to have on film, especially if we, got to film Denise and Ray and maybe even Mercedes there while that was happening. But I think ultimately, like, what was helpful is that we were able to like pull together photos and still tell that story at the end, even if it wasn't like a scene in the film. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I have to think about this question around like, what is that one scene we did have that we didn't put in? I don't know, Leah, do you have one?
I mean, there's a few that come to mind, but nothing stands out. But I would say also that we had a lot of moments of what was happening in the community because we serendipitously like planned our shoots around like major political things that were happening. And the election of between Beto and Ted Cruz was made the cut, but there was other things that had happened, like this scene where they watched Brett Kavanaugh getting elected to the Supreme Court, which now, would read very differently if we saw the film, if that was included, knowing what had happened with the Supreme Court. And then we also filmed a lot of when there was the like migrant caravan that was coming to the border, and Trump at the time was like saying terrible things about it and creating a lot of xenophobia, and like there was an increased border military presence, like all the troops that came to the border. We filmed that, like we filmed the troops coming there and putting the barbed wire up, and we filmed the bulldozers coming in to make these like temporary camps and like treating it like a war zone. And like it was like, also, I've only been pulled over in Texas, in McAllen, Texas, and it's been 3 times. Like I've never been pulled over anywhere else. And that's just, and I am a white person, and I like that's times, even worse for people of color in that region. And it's very militarized and very heavily policed. But also, what else there was unfortunately the detention center, when children were being kept in detention centers, was in McAllen, that Ursula detention center, and we filmed outside there. We filmed activists and organizers that were outside. And so, yeah, there's a lot that just didn't make it that I wish could have, because it's important. But as Maya said, it just, what we had to think about what storyline was it serving, and the film can't be 30 hours long, so we had to make it an hour and a half, or at least around that time.
So in the future, will there be a Zack Snyder cut of On the Divide, where it's everything? It is the 30 hour cut, or will there be little bits and pieces?
Well, if someone gave us money to edit that, we will do it. With the right price.
For the right price.
Yeah.
Speaking of the, you mentioned, you guys talked about, and it's very clear in the film of following, Ray, Denise, and Mercedes, and following like their stories. And even like you mentioned, some of the external stuff that was happening within the area, right, is a lot of heavy stuff. But then even within following their lives, there's a lot of heavy stuff that happens there too. So how did you all, that's got to take an emotional toll on you as filmmakers, right? Of capturing it, but not necessarily intervening with what's happening. So I'm curious how you two processed that, so since it's a long time having, following that.
Yeah, another great question. I think we're still working through that. I think my advice to any filmmaker who's setting out making an issue-driven documentary film with little resources to start out like we had, I think boundaries are really very important. Boundaries in terms of just, when you're creating relationships with your subjects, when you're filming, right? It's really important to, as much as you possibly can, and it's hard because as many, there's many documentary filmmakers who are very empathetic, and we feel it's just hard to not feel what you're filming and what you're taking in. But I think that, if I would have done anything differently, it would just been like, okay, let's try to remove ourselves when we need to, just to like process and take some mental health breaks. And I also think, this is something that is starting to be talked about in the documentary field, but I think should be talked about more. But really, there should be mental health resources for subjects and for the directors. I think that's super key, because like you said, like we do go through a lot where this is maybe not our lives directly, but when you're filming and creating relationships with the people that you're filming with, you're bound to also experience that kind of secondhand trauma. So, I think to answer your question, we're still kind of processing that, but I think what we were able to do with the 7 years of filming was really just create real trusted relationships with the subjects and with the community that we're filming with. And it really, brought us to a point where we wanted to do justice to this community as much as possible, like do justice to their story and collaborate with everyone we were filming with as much as possible, like really asking the community what they thought about like what stories need to be shared, right? And I think ultimately that helped with kind of healing through all of these things, because in the end, we really did create like real relationships with everyone in the community. And we also just like really made sure to listen. So there wasn't, although this was like, hard topics, we're dealing with Mercedes that goes through a lot, Denise, Ray, they all go through so much. I think ultimately in the end, because we were able to listen and kind of, take in as much as we could of what they were sharing with us, like what maybe they didn't want to be included, what they were okay with sharing, that I think it made it less I think there are like some, sometimes subject relationships and documentary director relationships can be tough, because sometimes like people watch the final film and they're like, I hate this, like you didn't say you were going to include any of this, right? But because we were kind of listening so much throughout the way, I made sure that we, showed the film to them even before it premiered at Tribeca, and they were able to process, what they saw. I think it ultimately like helped kind of like what the aftermath of the film became, if that makes sense. Because all of our three subjects really appreciate and like the film, and have like talked about how it was therapy for them and like have changed a lot throughout it. So I think ultimately, even though it was hard to process a lot of what we went through, it sort of, once we heard that from them and heard that like they could really use this as a tool to like, for the organizing work that they're doing or change people around them, it made it all worth it, if that makes sense. So I think like, yes, like still processing what we went through, still processing kind of a lot of the years that I don't like to say that we lost, we didn't lose anything, but it's just like a lot of years that we spent and dedicated our whole bodies and minds and hearts into this project, really all came to like, really it felt like, okay, it's worth it once it was like out in the world and people could see it and be like, wow, this really changed my mind about, someone like Mercedes. A lot of people have a certain perception going into a film about abortion, right? Or they have a certain perception of what they think about abortion. But I think we really wanted to turn the issue on its head. And so, yeah, I think it all made it worth it, to answer your question in a long-winded way, once the film was out and they were able to see it and they really liked it and continue to call us and tell us like, how much it impacted them. So yeah, I don't know, Leah, if you want to add to our mental health things.
That is completely fine. It is a tough thing, and I can only imagine what you two have gone through. Now, without, obviously, these are real people in this film. These are real lives. So without obviously out getting into information, but do you still keep up with, Ray, Denise, Mercedes? I know there was a screening of On the Divide, I think in August, and Denise was there as well. But do you keep in touch with like Ray and Mercedes?
Yeah. So we keep in touch with all of them. Ray and Denise were both able to attend the McAllen screening. Mercedes wasn't, because she's no longer in McAllen. But I just talked to her the other day. And an interesting thing happened where she was sharing with me that she really wants to be able to connect with Denise in South Texas Reproductive Justice, which, if you've seen the film, without giving too much away, Mercedes is a protester in the film. She is anti-abortion. She is outside of the clinic against, protesting against abortion and basically trying to keep patients from going inside, right? She is now transformed and on the other side. And she told me on the phone that she's like, I really want to talk to Denise and other members of the organization to see if I can provide Plan B and some of the reproductive, healthcare resources that they're passing out in the Rio Grande Valley, if I can do that where I am in Texas, because she's in a different area in Texas right now. And like, I was just like, what? It's like, something we never could have imagined. And I think, just to go back to your question about like mental health and tying that in a little bit, again, it's like, these are the moments that make this journey worth it, right? Like, even though we went through so much, and I'm just so thankful again that like, Leah and I were in this together. So when things were hard and we were going through things, we could kind of help and support each other and work through things together. But it's moments like that where it's like, okay, this is why we made this film, right? It's like, because we got to see something like as beautiful as Mercedes, who had this kind of complicated life and might have been full of different contradictions, like we all are as humans. She was able to go through this journey through her own self-discovery, that like access to reproductive healthcare is necessary. And she's still religious, right? But she understands the like having choice is necessary, right? And being pro-choice is okay, right? And people can people can get abortions or they can't. It's their choice. So I think, yeah, it's really those moments that's just like, okay, yeah, we made this film for this reason, like, because we want to reach people who might have the same, going through the same things as Mercedes and can't see themselves in anyone else. Like maybe she could be someone that they're like, oh, Bella seems like a family member of mine. Like I understand maybe like the journey that she went through and why choice is necessary for people to have. And then we also stay in touch with Ray. Ray's doing okay right now. He no longer works in the clinic. At the clinic, I mean, the clinic is now closed down anyways, unfortunately, because of overturning of Roe v. Wade. But he's doing okay. He's taking care of his sister. He's still in the Valley. And Denise is doing okay. She's a nurse now, and going through a lot, obviously. Like it's really hard to be a healthcare worker in these days. But yeah, we're very proud of her and her accomplishments. So yeah, we still stay in touch with them, and even the other organizers that you see, the other clinic escorts, Denny and Melissa, who are part of the South Texans Reproductive Justice, as along with Denise, like we keep in contact with them. And yeah, so yeah, really a special community we were able to build through this film.
Yeah. Speaking of like community, so even though like reproductive justice is an issue that affects everyone, right? The film also highlights like intersectionality of the issues that come across. And you both, because I think Mai said you're from the West Coast, Leah said from the East Coast. This film it's in Texas. This documentary is about a community in Texas on the border. So what advice would you have for filmmakers who want to highlight issues affecting communities that they themselves are not a part of?
Yeah, I think that especially if they're white, need to like take a second and say to themselves, there should be a checklist, like, is this the film I should be making? Am I in touch with and collaborating with the organizers or other people from that community on this project? And yeah, and there's a great framework that just got released like a couple of weeks ago that I honestly wish was circulated and around when I was starting out as a 21-year-old, but it's called the DAWG Documentary Accountability Working Group. And this, sorry, you're both frozen. Am I frozen?
No,
You're good.
Okay. So yeah, and it's called the acronym is DAWG, and this working group has set out a bunch of guidelines for filmmakers that talk exactly about this, and even like internal processing which needs to take place recommended to take place before stepping onto a set or production. And also I think, yeah, just constantly questioning yourself, especially if you're not from the community, especially if you're white, just constantly a series of questioning, open to feedback and reception. If someone tells you, hey, this isn't portrayed correctly, like don't meet it with defensiveness, which is happening right now with a lot of very well-known white filmmakers. And it's showing up in like major film festivals right now. Is a major debate about this, and a lot of the influential documentary filmmakers in power, who are mainly white people, are very resistant to feedback when somebody from that community says this isn't it's not the right way to portray my community. And I think instead of the resistance, I think there needs to be more conversation and including those perspectives in. And like there's just not to mention the overall issue of like capitalism infiltration in the documentary medium and like ethical dilemmas and concerns that have come up. But I think if you're just starting out, like the best thing you can do is look up DAWG working group and make sure that you're reading the right materials and doing the right research and talking to the right community members. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. And I think something else that, like, just as an example of what we did was when we first got in contact with the clinic workers who work inside the McAllen clinic that we filmed at, one of the first questions we asked on the phone, or like first phone call with them, was, what are stories that you feel like are being misrepresented or ignored? Or what do you feel like people are not talking about? And the clinic worker that I talked to on the phone was like, wow, no one has ever asked me that. No reporter, no like documentary filmmaker trying to like chase the story has, because other people have approached them, right? Like, this is the last abortion clinic. Everyone's like, ooh, let's try to document this. But no one has ever asked them, like, what do you think? And that was really eye-opening for me and for Leah, just with like even our whole approach. Like, it ended up informing our whole approach of the film, because we were like, okay, it's so important that like we are not from here. Yes, I'm a Latina filmmaker, but we are not a monolith. Like, it's not like we are all the same. I have very different upbringing than a lot of people do in this community. So I'm not going to come in here and be like, oh, I know what the story is and I know what's best, right? Like, I want to learn from people who grew up on the border and learn like what they think needs to be shared, or stories they feel like are being represented in the mainstream news, right? So that, even that one question alone of just like, what are stories that are being left out? What is the news getting wrong? What is like mainstream media getting wrong about this community? That really helped us inform the story that we ended up making, like helped inform the whole film. And it was so important for us to understand that, reporters had come in, like all the organizers that we talked to, the clinic worker, like I mentioned, told us like, yeah, there have been reporters who kind of come in and just want a certain story. They like ask them specifically, like, can you maybe share with us like a patient you might have helped that is undocumented and is trying to get an abortion, which is like, all of those are real stories and need to be highlighted. It's very important. But you shouldn't be chasing a kind of trauma porn story just so you can, have a clickable article, right? Like, you are going into a community that's not your own. You need to be like talking to the community and learning from them, right? And collaborating with them and letting their voice shine through, because then it's like, what's the point of this film, right? Or what's the point of your article or your news piece? So yeah, I think that would be my advice to filmmakers coming in. It's like, really get on a call with someone. First of all, do not just come in and be like, hey, I'm here to film you. Create relationships, do the groundwork of building trusted relationships and showing, what you're about and what, and again, like Leah said, be ready to make mistakes and be called out and be okay with that. Right. And shift, maybe even shift like the direction of your film because of that. I think that ultimately really helped us, was just knowing that like, we don't have all the answers. We are not the experts. We want to learn from this community as much as like we are trying to share their story. We want to learn from them and collaborate with them. So yeah, that ultimate advice is just like, ask what you don't know about and ask what, are stories that you feel like they want to share. And you ultimately will get really interesting answers that way. Like, being able to talk to the clinic worker and hearing her side of things and being like, no one's ever talked about this. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Like, not only is this important to know, it's like important for us for our research and informing the film. And I think that ultimately made the film stronger, just because we were asking questions of the community and asking them like, what do you want to see?
Those are great responses. Thank you both for those responses. Now, I know with this interview, we've hit a handful of heavy subjects, and being respectful of your time, kind of want to end things on a lighter end. So I don't know if either of you had seen Hot Ones, where it's like hot wings and they do an interview. Clearly I could not, we couldn't do the hot wings. Now, that being said, I did try and deep dive your socials. Leah, your socials are I try to find I had to go a different route to try and get a photo. So I got a photo from each of you. And so as an outro, if you could explain the photo, as well as if there's anything, current new that you're currently working on, either together or independently, kind of that way you can kind of plug yourself, as well as where can people find more of your work. So we're going to start with you, Leah. So hold on. Actually, I thought I had the photo.
You're making us both be like, we need to scrub our social media. Like,
okay,
I already did that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you guys already have done that, because I
was ready for this. I'm curious.
There are less photos than I had saw. So let me see. Can you guys see the photo? Is the photo there?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So Leah, explain the photo.
So this is a classic scenario of me having a little bit of wine before talking in public with Maya. Maya and I this was at the Silver Sun residency run by Karen Goodman, and it's in Woodstock, New York. And this is where the film really started to come together. Like, Maya and I began our edit consulting process with our edit consultant at the time, Dina Gutman, and the culmination of this residency in Woodstock, New York, was to screen our previous short films. So this is like right before that. And that's Sean Weiner with the food in his mouth, which he looks great right now. And then my really close friend, Emily Shaw, that lives in the area, who came out and supported. And I would just say this is a classic scenario of me consulting my two friends that I know in the room with some wine before speaking in public. And I would say the outfit is my go-to. Like you'll see that outfit in other Q&As, but that's my go-to like jumper. That's that photo. And I also used deleteme.com and also redid my social media because I didn't want anti-choice people to come and kill me. So that's why it must have been harder for
you. Also, to end this on a lighter note, you're probably talking about hamsters or something.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was just saying, when I was trying to look for photos, I was like, I know they went to college in like the 2010s. There should be more photos. Now, so Leah, Leah, that was your photo, and now Maya, this is your photo.
Yes, so this is one of my favorite photos that exist. For people who don't know, I mean, I hope everyone knows who Issa Rae is, but that's Issa Rae. And this was one of this was when she was first starting out and was just starting The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl, which was her web series before Insecure, before Rap Shit, which is her newest HBO show. But Issa Rae is like one of my heroes. And I say that because her web series came out when we were freshmen in college. And I remember it was my roommate at the time was like, you need to watch this girl. She's super funny. Like, just start watching these YouTube videos. And it was at this time where like YouTube, it was big already, but like people weren't really doing web series like this, like actual like short internet shows. And so I started watching her first episode of Awkward Black Girl, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, who's this person? And I just remember, like freshman year, we're all confused about like who we are. Like, I wasn't, I'm like a mixed girl from Berkeley, California, and then I went to Ithaca College, and I was just like, wait, what's going on? Like, this is a strange place. And like very, very white. And it just like got me through a lot, and it got me through like a lot of hard times, just watching her show. And so this was a moment that I got to meet her at, like, it was like a meet and greet of one of her, she was showing an episode of Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl, and then we got to talk after. And I remember I took the opportunity to be like, can I interview you? I was working for youth radio at the time, which is like a organization, nonprofit organization in Oakland that like teaches youth everything from like radio broadcasting to making music. And I was working there as a producer at the time. And she was like, right now? And I was like, no, I got like really nervous. I was like, I can just email you. And I always regret that moment because I should have just been like, yeah, let's do the interview right now. Because then she blew up and I never got that interview, but I have the picture for the memory.
Well, you could always, hey, put it out into the universe and tweet her or see what happens. Maybe eventually, maybe one day you'll get that interview.
Yeah, I think
years down the line. But so thank you, Maya and Leah. Thank you both so much. So as a final outro, where can we find you guys? I mean, not like in person, right? But like, where can we follow what you're working on, as well as there like a plug, for something that you're currently working on or will be coming up soon that you kind of want to throw out there as well?
Yeah, do you want to start, Leah, or should I start?
Sure. It doesn't matter. So you can find out more about the film on thedividemovie.com. And right now you can request a good talk with your university, religious organization, or organization. And then we're hoping to get it up online very soon so that people can watch it for your low cost on platforms to be determined. But if you want to just be in touch with us about when that all happens, how you can share the film on thedividemovie.com. And then personally, I have a website. It's my first and last name.com, leahgalant.com, Galant. I didn't spell my first name is Leah. Yeah, if you want to work with me on anything, I'm freelancing and then also developing a second feature, unfortunately not with Maya this time, but she'll definitely be part of the project in other capacities, but about memorialization culture with Germany as a case study and the uses and misuses of cultures of memory. And that is in development right now. So that's what I'm working on. Maya, what about you?
Yeah, so other than following the film, like Leah just mentioned on our website, because you can follow me on my socials and find other photos. My social is just maya.cueva_ on Instagram, and then Mayita Cuevita at Twitter. And I'm currently working on 2 podcasts right now. I'm an audio producer for 2, and one of them is called Tales of the Town. It's about the history of Black Oakland in particular, the Black community in Oakland, and it really dives into like 100 years of history in Oakland. So the first episode, it's all a scripted podcast, so it's taking you through like kind of a character. It's a kind of like an audio documentary for podcasts. If you listen to This American Life or 1619, some of those podcasts, it's similar to that. But it's really following years of Oakland history, and the first episode talks about the Great Migration. So when many Black people had to, escape the white supremacy, racist Jim Crow South and come to Oakland. And then the second episode talks about the Black Panther Party. The third episode is about organizing in Merritt College. We talk about Oakland music history and all these things. So check that out. It's on everywhere that you can get your podcasts. It's hosted by 2 really good friends of mine who are incredible organizers in Oakland, Delancey Parham and Abbas Mutakim, and it's called Tales of the Town. So subscribe.
And thank you so much. I'm going to end